Good morning, my name is Doug Hamilton. I'm the owner of Oak Grove Construction. We're putting together a kind of a video to share with you what site work construction is all about. We're out at Sonoma Valley High School where we're doing a major project, reconstructing the track and field, bleachers, basketball courts, all sorts of athletic improvements. It's a huge project for the Sonoma Valley High School. Our purpose today is just to get you excited about construction or share with you our excitement. It's not to make you a specialist or an expert in any particular area. We're going to just walk around the job and I'll be pointing out some items that I think may be of interest, just to kind of have some content. And if you are interested in construction, we have all sorts of programs that the Career Technical Education Foundation can hook you up with. So to start, you'll notice that I've got on safety equipment. Safety is a huge issue with respect to construction. I'll be talking about it as we go forward. We are in the middle of COVID-19 protocols, so I don't have my face mask on because I'm well away from everyone else, but you will notice that everyone else on the job site is wearing a face mask or respirator. Speeding through, you look to right, is the first major asset I ever bought 15 years ago. It's a 45,000 pound excavator that cost $250,000, and it's still working most every day. The tools of our trade are very, very expensive, but they're durable. So if they're maintained well and taken care of, they will last a long time. These huge concrete vaults behind me are for electrical switching and splicing. You never actually see them in this state. They're all buried underneath the ground. What you may see often in a sidewalk or a planter will be these steel lids, and that's how they're accessed to work. You have to have an electrician's license and special certification to work inside a hot electrical box. So my business, we do grading, paving, pipeline, everything from the underground down. We can install these boxes in the conduit to them. We cannot touch the wires or splice them or even enter the box once they're energized. Over the last few decades, there's been a lot of changes in site work construction. Obviously, technology is part of it. We're using GPS, sonar, lasers, all sorts of high-tech equipment. But probably the most significant one has to do with protecting the environment, erosion control in particular. So you'll notice as you look around the site that the ground is moist, where dust is considered a contaminant. So we have to keep the dust down. This is called silt fence, and it's used to keep runoff from contaminating other areas, particularly waterways. This pit behind me is a specialized feature called a bioswale. And the runoff from the construction project will go into this medium, and it's sand and organics, and it will filter that water out. So any oils or pollutants generated off this project will go into this filter. And there's layers of fabric and specialty material, and that will pull all that out. In addition, the plants will grow on top of this, and those plants actually extract some of those contaminants. These are now requirements throughout all of California, and it's expanding to the rest of the United States. It's a major part of a construction project now. It used to be we would just do erosion control from April 15th to October 15th. Now it's 365 days a year. Talk real briefly about equipment. This is a D5 cat bulldozer. It's really used primarily for finish work. It knocks dirt down and moves it around, but it doesn't move it very far. A lot of fun to ride or run. My son's been running that bulldozer since he was 2 years old in my lap. There's its big brother, that's a D6. If you look at the yellow mass on the blade, those are for receivers for the GPS system. So that dozer, the operator essentially drives it forward and back and makes sure he doesn't run somebody over, and the computer and satellite system adjusts the blade to cut to the final grade that we want. So phenomenal technology. It costs $100,000 a machine to put it on. So on this job, we currently only have it on 2 machines. In front of that is a sheep's foot compactor. All these tractors are extremely expensive, so I named them personally. That one's name is Thumper. The little bulldozer is a Caterpillar. I name it Kitten. And working in the background is a 308 excavator. We would call that a medium-size excavator. The uniqueness of that model is that both the turntable turns like the top of a tank, but the boom swings also. So it enables us to dig right next to a wall or next to a footing, which a larger excavator cannot do. There's a 304, 305, we call that a mini. It's about a 10 or 11,000 pound machine. And then a medium size Komatsu behind it, which is about a 33,000 pound machine. I think we have 6 or 7 excavators on this job right now. When I started in the business 40 years ago, you might have 1 excavator and 7 backhoes. I now own 9 excavators and 3 backhoes, which is an indication of the versatility of a track excavator. All right, so we're here at one of our many staging areas throughout the project. Again, the logistics of how do you build a project this large and not run on top of each other is very, very important. It's expensive to move things 2 or 3 times, so pre-planning is also very important. What we're looking at here is a bunch of water materials. This is a backflow preventer to make sure your water doesn't get contaminated. These are pipe fittings and valves and boxes. This is all part of underground construction. So knowing what it's used for, how to put it together. I want to talk briefly just about education. Everything associated with I'm going to show you today, with a few rare examples, does not require even a high school diploma. Certainly does not require a college degree. Exception would be an electrician or a plumber where there's a license required where life safety is a concern. But to run these tractors, to bolt this pipe together, to work for my company, I hope that you have a high school education. I think that's important, but it's not a requirement. It's really on-the-job training. The most important is to be safe and then to be efficient. You need to become a profit center for your boss if you want to maintain your job. So if we just pan off to your left for a second, we'll see a couple other types of pipe. And blue pipe usually means water pipe. Green means sewer or storm drain. Black usually means storm drain. The colors are important because when someone's digging underground later, they want to be able to identify by the color what type of pipe they've encountered. Quite often we will also put a marker tape above it to be a kind of recognition of what's buried below. Pipes can be very, very dangerous. High pressure gas lines, high pressure water mains, sewer, high voltage electric, a lot of that stuff can kill you. So a big part of safety in this business is knowing where utilities are and how to carefully work around them without either damaging the utility or hurting yourself or your coworkers. Okay, so what we wanted to do is talk a little bit about underground construction here. What we're looking at is a trench and some components that I want to point out. Number one is the purple pipe. That tells anyone working around it that it's reclaimed water. In other words, don't drink it, you'll get sick. And then you'll also notice the black pipe on top. That is actually potable water that is not permanent yet. That's going to go in the trench later. You see these aluminum braces in the trench. That's a safety device to keep the trench from caving in on our people. Anytime you're in a trench 5 feet or deeper, we have to have, they're called hydraulic shores. And then obviously a ladder. We have to have a ladder within 25 feet of anyone working in a trench 4 feet or deeper. You'll see that all the employees have hard hats on, face masks. Because of COVID, there's no other facial exposure or respiratory exposure. But if you see, they're actually mixing concrete. And concrete puts off dust, and that creates a exposure that can cause chemical burns in your lungs and your hands and your eyes. The concrete is used to pour thrust blocks so that at angle points in a pressurized system, the pipe doesn't blow apart. This is standard underground stuff. On a large project, we might have a truck come pour concrete for the kickers, but there's not enough. That's expensive to do, just a question of volume. You can look around and see some of these guys are equipment operators, some of them are pipe layers or plumbers. We all work together to try and get the job done. What we expect for people in construction is do what's needed. If you sit around and say, I don't do that, or that's not part of my job description, you will find out you won't have a job. You have to have a willingness to help out, and your willingness and persistence in doing that will get everyone else to say, we want him or her back. Speaking of hims and hers, there's nothing about construction that requires facial hair. We desperately need more women in construction, and we are open advocates for that, and you will find that it is a much more respectful workplace on a construction job site than it was decades ago. Thank you. What we're doing now on the outside of the track is we're placing aggregate base rock, and that's to give strength to it. On top of the base rock, we will be paving it like a street. You will never see that asphalt. On top of that asphalt will be a rubberized product that you may have seen that allows the athletes to run, creates a cushion for their knees and their joints, and also excellent traction. The base rock, the color of the base rock is immaterial. That's a function of the quarry it comes from. The moisture content is very, very important. If you add too much water, it will start to move, kind of make mud out of it. Not enough water, and you cannot get compaction. So the water hoses in the water truck and that tractor are blending the dry rock with water to what we call slightly over optimum. And it's a little bit like making bread. It doesn't take long to develop an expertise, but it is an expertise developed over time. If you get it too wet, then we gotta wait to dry it out. If you don't have enough moisture and you compact it, you have to tear up your work. So the moisture content, judging that is a very, very important skill. Going around, you can see the motor grader, or otherwise known as the blade, trimming this rock off and leveling it down. That machine is operated with the GPS system. So the operator is just trying to not run over somebody, but the actual control of the blade can be done manually, or it can be controlled by the satellite and computer system. The smaller tractor, the loader scraper, is doing the work in the tight areas where the larger machine can't get. The tolerances or the accuracy of the smaller tractor is much lower. The bigger machine with the electronics will do a much better job. If we look out towards the synthetic turf area, you'll see these diagonals. Those are actually called strip drains. There's a multiple layers of rock and fabric and materials in a synthetic field that allow rainwater and a downpour. The water will go through those permeable systems and leave the field, so the football players or lacrosse or soccer players are not sloshing through water. And also there's no mud. In order for that system to work, very, very close tolerances, and then around the perimeter is a concrete curb with what we call a slot drain. Again, very, very tight tolerances. The rubberized track drains to that slot drain. The middle of the field drains to that slot drain, and all that water eventually goes to the filtering system, the bioswale that we showed you earlier, to take out any contaminants before it eventually discharges to the creek or the bay. You'll see the perimeter curb here and fence posts, another indication of the interlap between disciplines. So a fencing contractor will do those posts, a concrete contractor will do the curb, we will do the rock and the excavation. The electrician might be running, and if we pan a little bit to your left, you'll see this concrete post. That concrete post will be a large tower lights for the stadium. Right now it's just the foundation, and the metal tubes of the tower itself slides over the top of that foundation. And then you see the conduit stubbed out of the ground temporarily now. Those will be the power wires and the speakers and the communication lines. In a sophisticated field like this, we will actually run telephone lines and data lines to the sidelines, so the coaches can be talking to people up in the stands, much like a professional ball field. This is a very, very nice system. It will be in use for decades. As we pan more to your right, you can see other continuing activities and an idea of the level of activity and the multiple subcontractors working on a job at one time. So you have concrete subcontractors right here forming up to pour a curb. You will see the reinforcing steel that was already set by a reinforcing subcontractor. You'll see trucks bringing aggregate base, sand, base rock, drain rock. Our loader bringing material to the trenches as they backfill it. You'll see a white tent, which is a safety requirement to make sure that everyone has shade and potable water and a place to sit and relax to get out of the heat. See more purple pipe, a lot of red flagging. One other thing that I want to point out is these little things that seem so simple, and my son used to knock them down because he thought they didn't belong there. These are called survey stakes, and every time you see one, assume that if you damage it, it's going to cost $1,000. So for a licensed land surveyor to come out and replace these points is very, very expensive, and everything is built off of these stakes. We use the GPS system to be redundant, but the actual survey control is done by a land surveyor. That is another area of expertise. If you're really good in math and you don't necessarily want to get dirty, but you like being outside, it's another area of construction in addition to running tractors, cutting steel, pouring concrete. But running over these, if you want to not have a job for very long, hit a couple of these that the boss has to pay for, and you'll find out how expensive they really are. Going off into the distance, you'll see another excavator. They're doing digging joint trench. We'll go look at that next. But this is a pretty good indication of the activity level, and I will just say excitement associated with construction. I've done it for 40 plus years. I've never had a day that was boring. There are some days I don't want to repeat, but I've never been bored. I love being outside. I love the camaraderie and interaction. Construction is a team sport. If you don't like working with others, don't get into construction. But if you enjoy having fun responsibly and safely, it's a great career. So a couple other things to share with you. This is a classic mechanical pad. So you see all the pipes set up very carefully. You see the large copper wire, the reinforcing steel. This is very heavy mechanical and electrical equipment. The location of the conduits has to be exact because they have to have separations on the wall in order for all the conduits to work. And then the copper wire is what's called a ground. So if there ever is a short, the electricity goes down to the ground instead of electrifying the person that happens to be touching. These are rebar caps or stake caps to make sure that if someone trips and falls, you don't get a piece of steel impaled into your body. This is what we call a slop or leftover pour. Just dump out the concrete. This is not going to be the finished floor area. It isn't. There's steel, reinforcing steel, adobes, but this formwork, the bottom of that 2x4 is actually going to be the top of the slab, and they still have more concrete to go in here. Concrete is a mixture of sand, aggregate, cement, and water. It doesn't dry, it cures, so there's actually a chemical reaction that makes it harder, and it gets harder over time. It is very dangerous to get in your eyes. It is exothermic. It'll burn your skin, and obviously we talked earlier about washing it out. That we don't want that going into the creek because it'll plug the gills of fish. So if you look off to your right here, there's the concrete washout station, the little kiddie pools for the smaller washout, and then the large one for a whole truck. So it's very, very important nowadays to make sure that you're not just discarding wet concrete or washout. Next to it, you'll see some reinforcing cages. Those are for the tall backstop posts and batting cages, fences. They're cheaper to prefabricate offsite and then come and install with a crane. So they came that way. They were not fabricated on the property here. Looking again back over the equipment pad, you can tell by the height of this rebar there actually will be a wall here. And see the absence of the rebar, guess where the door is? Okay. In the background here are the posts for the batting cages. They are preset. So again, multiple layers of subcontractors that have to work together. You have the grading guys that did the stuff and any pipe underneath it. We excavated for the curb. The fence sub put in the poles. The concrete guy is doing the wall. And then there'll be a different fence sub that does the fencing around it to keep the balls within. Looking off back in the future or in the distance, you can see more rebar cages that have been brought and staged. Again, it's out of the way where everyone's working, so good planning there. Behind that, more of the metal posts that'll go in the ground later. So strategic location of your materials where you don't have to move them is part of the experience necessary to be successful in construction. This is kind of an exciting indication of what electricians go through. So this is power, conduit, signal, cable TV, could be fiber optic. It's all things electrical and communication. There's no gas lines in here, but these great conduits are actually chases for wires to go through later. They all have a unique location and the type of box they go into and the function that they perform. So it becomes a little mind tangling to figure out how to make all this work. To me, this is artwork. Some people might not find it entertaining or exciting, but there are required separations between different voltages and telemetry lines, phone lines, cable TV, and electric. So this is actually very well constructed in engineering. I think it's cool. Some people just think it's a bunch of dirt and pipe. Let's move on over and look at our crew installing some of this joint trench. Okay, so just a little quick lesson on joint trench. Joint trench is really a term used where you're putting multiple different facilities in one particular trench. Most commonly it's referred to for electric, telephone, cable TV, and gas lines. In this particular case, we actually also have a water line. So the darker gray pipe that you're seeing off to your left is that Schedule 80 PVC water pipe. So very, very different than the Schedule 40 electrical pipe. Okay, the wall thickness is different. The electrical pipe is not designed to be watertight. Okay, water can be in with those wires. That's what that copper ground wire is for. The water pipe has to be watertight. So you'll see that we've got separations, and again, each one of these goes to a certain location. This one here that you can't read says must go. That's going to the tower lights. Obviously, you have to hook the right conduit up to the right location or the wires won't go there. Showing again the safety tape that we put on. The blue one is saying water line buried below, and the red ones are electric lines buried below. Sand backfill, anytime you're digging and you see sand, you want to be very careful. There's something close below that creates a hazard both for you and to the utility. Again, looking off, this will be a restroom. So all those brown brackets those are the receivers for the bottom end of a toilet. So the black pipe is where the stuff goes out, and the bracket holds it at exactly the right location. So all that is set up ready for a restroom. They're continuing to do the same thing in this other. So this obviously is the restroom building. That would be a licensed plumber. Again, in order to do that work as a contractor, you need a specialty license, but to do the actual plumbing is usually learned on the job, as with so many of the other trades. Let's move on down to where the crew's working. Okay, this is a great example of here we are digging a new piece of electric line to the soccer field, and the operator and the spotter with them came across the tape that says caution electric line. So they were able to dig this trench and not damage that electric line. Luckily, it's not hot, there's no wire in it yet, but there's a classic example of why we use sand and why we use the tape, is to make it safer and more efficient for us to go through later. So the operator is digging the trench. The spotter or grade setter is telling him when he's deep enough. and then he's loading into a truck behind him. And again, that dirt will go over to our staging area instead of leaving it on the ground where we got to pick it up again. With this many people working, dirt needs to go in a truck and get out of everyone's way. Great, so while we're here now with McClure Electric, they're installing conduit in a trench that we had dug for them, and we're actually backfilling and compacting behind them. So I don't know the job well enough to know exactly what these conduits are for, but it's relatively simple work when you learn how to do it right. What you don't want to do in gluing conduit together is have a lot of shards inside, so when they pull the wire through later, it shreds the insulation off of the wire. Conduit is pretty flexible, so we don't have to use a lot of fittings. We can bend it around big turns. Then you can see down there that we've already sanded it, and we've put the warning tape for electric, and we've put the warning tape for the water line. Shortly they'll have this hooked up, and we'll be able to place sand, tape, and backfill. And then if you pan to your left, you'll see our compactor that is very, very heavy, and that's what compacts the soil that we don't have trench settlement later. You don't want to put all this fancy field work in and then have divot holes later like gophers went through. So trench compaction and the moisture associated with it is another important aspect of our work. So this is the soccer field, and they're now currently installing the irrigation piping. So this actually will be real grass as opposed to the football field. It'll be synthetic. So they're just trenching and putting in their conduits. Again, getting compaction is important, but this will not get the drain fabric and all the other fancy stuff that the football field does, because you're actually going to have green grass going here. This will be higher maintenance, but often is quite preferred by soccer players to play on live grass. Okay, so we're now down back to the infield again, which is a fairly elaborate system. There's a series of permeable pipes and drains underneath all this that was work completed earlier that you can't see. And then we had to compact the top of it and trim it off exactly using the GPS on our motor grader. Then this is a filter fabric that allows water to go through but does not allow sand or silt to go through. And then these are the trench drains that as the water builds up on the subgrade, it will go into these trench drains and run out to perimeter drains or center drains, and that's what keeps the water off it. If we look off to here, this is actually the height of the football field. So there'll be 2 layers of permeable rock, and then a pad, and then the actual turf material gets nailed to this synthetic header, and then it gets filled with cork or rubber, beaded rubber. I'm not sure which product they're going to use. I believe they're using cork on this field. But there's still a tremendous amount of work to be done on this field, and when all that's done by a specialty subcontractor, then they actually cut in the letters for the hash marks and the goalpost and the numbers and the logo for the school. So there's a tremendous amount of work left to do here, a tremendous amount of progress that's been made. I hope this video shows you an indication of the variety of work that can be done on a construction site work project, and we haven't even touched buildings. Thank you for your attention, and wish you the best of luck. Thank you.